Hello, we are back. Fantasy baseball Q&A. I'm Eric Samulski, joined by Chris Crawford. We took a little break, Chris, with the
Yes.
Olympics. We had
Yeah.
to let the YouTube channel do its thing with the Olympics.
And I just
Did you
know.
watch any?
Oh gosh, yeah. Handball is the best sport in the world. Like
Oh
if
my
I could
God,
get
yes.
if I could get paid to write about handball, like that would be. I'll talk to who I got to talk to at NBC to get a fantasy league started for that stuff. I just noticed I'm wearing my USA hat. This is from the Ryder Cup 2018 in a year they lost in spectacular fashion. But just completely coincidental that I'm wearing my Team USA stuff right after the Olympics.
Yeah, no, well timed.
Yeah.
I went to a camp. I think I might have been like 9 years old. It was the first time I played handball, and I was like, "Oh, this sport's
Oh,
fun."
you
I might
played it
be.
before? Oh my
I
gosh, I'm
played.
so
Yeah,
jealous.
it was like a summer camp thing. It was one of
Oh,
those things where you're like, "Man, I think I'm really good at this." But when you're
how
9, you think that about like everything.
how are we
Yeah.
how are we not a power at that sport? How are we not
It's
taking some retired pitchers and
yeah,
just going out and throwing 102 into that goal? Like, how is that not happening?
20 2028
Yeah,
LA Olympics handball. We're gonna do it,
beautiful,
people. Let's
beautiful.
get by that point, maybe Clayton Kershaw wants to do it. Who knows? We'll
Yeah,
we'll have to see.
yeah.
Um, but
Him
yeah,
and
we're
Stafford
we're
should do it
back.
together.
We are back. We're here to talk any and all things baseball. Um, Obviously, there will be some questions about Junior Caminero.
Mm,
So I don't, I won't jump the gun on that right now. We'll let people get to those questions. You can ask all questions on YouTube. If you're on Twitch, you can ask questions there. If you are listening to this but don't want to ask on YouTube for whatever reason, ask on Twitter. We are
yeah.
monitoring that as we record. News just came out. We blurbed it on the site. River Ryan is going to have Tommy John surgery. Um, it's obviously a bummer, and it was one of the possibilities when he had the forearm tightness. I feel like this, given the time of everything, this may also mean that River Ryan misses basically all of next year as well, which is something to keep in mind for your keeper leagues and stuff like that. Is the Dodgers are likely to be in contention again next year. They're likely to be a
Right.
perennial contender that probably won't feel the need to rush him back um, you know, just 12 months after Tommy John surgery. So I feel like, this is obviously a drop in all redraft leagues. And I think he doesn't really need to be held in keeper formats unless you're in like a dynasty where, the roster just kind of rolls over.
Right. Yeah, this is a bummer, man, because and my buddy our buddy Rotopat just tweeted something that suggested maybe the Dodgers are bad at this. Like, if you take a look at what their injury history is as of
Yeah.
late, outside of Julio Urias, who is an on-field success, as Rotopat again put out, and Walker Buehler before the injury, looked like they were really, really good at this. I'm not so sure anymore. And this is something I think you have to be at least a little cognizant of with prospects. But yeah, this is such a bummer for a guy who has such electric stuff. By the way, he was traded for Matt Beattie. What a regrettable trade for the San Diego Padres. But yeah, I think this is unfortunately somebody you just have to ignore for obviously the rest of 2024. And I'd be really surprised if he threw a pitch in 2025 as well. Still some long-term upside. It's worth pointing out he's 25 years old. So there's a good chance that he's not throwing a pitch until
he's 27.
27. And, that's not old. I'm 41. I refuse to call 27 old. But it's not necessarily a spring chicken in terms of pitching age either.
Sure.
So yeah, this is just a really big bummer because the stuff is just so good.
And it's interesting you mentioned the Dodgers haven't been good in regards to injuries for starting pitchers, but also like you can make an argument about their development of young starting pitchers too, where like they definitely have interesting pitching prospects, right? But look at who has hit. I mean, Bobby Miller was a pretty big success story until this year.
Yeah.
Dustin May has flashed, but not really come to any sort of high-end rotation consistency.
No.
Walker Buehler flashed, and then what's happened there?
Yeah.
Emmett Sheehan hurt, River Ryan hurt, Gavin Stone flashed, but also has kind of fallen back a little bit. Landon Knack, fine.
Yep.
Like all these guys, there's a little bit of like back in the day when all the Yankees prospects were like amazing, and then they got to the majors and they weren't any good. And the
Right.
Dodgers are obviously a better version of that because these guys are good, but they go from this is an elite pitching prospect to this is a pretty good pitching prospect.
Yep, and that's not even including Nick Frozzo, who is a guy who we haven't gotten to see in 2024 because he underwent surgery as well. So yeah,
Right.
I think
Kyle Hurt, who is
Kyle
also
Hurt.
hurt right now.
Boy, what a terrible name. Kyle Hurt and DL Hall, change your names, guys. It's just not going to be successful until you do so. And there's still some interesting guys in the system like Jackson Ferris and those guys.
Glad you asked that.
Yeah.
So we got a Couch Ad asked, and there have been other questions, guys. Keep putting your questions in. I'm not skipping over you. This was just relevant to the conversation we are currently having. But Couch Ad asked, is it crazy if I'm starting to think Jackson Ferris is worth a stash and redraft? They have a pretty aggressive next man up mentality, and despite his age, he's coming off a pretty ridiculous outing. Jackson Ferris is a 20-year-old. He's currently in Double-A, and he was traded from the Cubs, and that was. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why am I blanking?
That's the Michael Busch trade.
That is Michael Busch.
The Michael Busch trade. Yeah.
So as our resident prospect expert, what are your thoughts on the idea of Jackson Ferris in redraft?
It's not insane. I would say that it's probably a little early. He's made one start in Double-A so far. I think that though, if he has another great start in Double-A, it's something that you have to consider, just because there's just not a lot of depth there. And it's not like they can go make trades right now. So yeah, I mean, this is a guy with 3+ pitches. He could have a fourth in his change as well. Command is kind of shaky, but I think the stuff is there. You have to love the fact that if he does make the majors this year, he's playing behind a lineup that can really provide some run support for you and get some W chances. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. There's probably better options out there, but if you're in a league where you are kind of in that desperate stage to add something with some upside, yeah, Jackson Ferris makes some sense.
Yeah. We'll talk about one of those options in a second. Michael says, sup, y'all. What's up? Michael, welcome. Thanks for being here. Light Blue Yoshi says hello. And hello. We're going to talk about the big prospect promotion of the day.
Yeah.
It's Zeke Matthews, which is not the biggest prospect promotion of the day, but it is relevant because we were just talking about other possible redraft league pitching prospects. And so I did want to touch on Zeke Matthews, who Dad asks, what are our thoughts on Zeke Matthews? What kind of leagues would you add him in? I will just start with the facts of people that don't know much about Zeke Matthews, and then I will let you take the analysis portion of it. But I had to look up a lot about Zeke Matthews. Actually, I'm going to be writing about his debut in my Mixing It Up column, where I look at pitchers' pitch mix changes and overall pitch mixes. It's coming out tomorrow morning. So I've been doing a lot of research on Zeke Matthews' pitch mix, and we'll be watching the start tonight. He started off the season in High A. He made 4 starts in High A. He was promoted to Double-A. He made 9 starts, pitched in 10 games in Double-A, 1.95 ERA, 0.76 WHIP. Got called up to Triple-A, where things haven't been as great, but are getting better. The big thing here, 1.9% walk rate. He has 114 strikeouts to 7 walks on the season. That is absurd. Those are real numbers. If you look at, Eno Saris talked about the location plus grades on Zeke Matthews in the minors. He has elite location plus on every single pitch, basically. His command is tremendous. This is a guy who came out as like a 92 mile an hour fastball guy. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but now can run it up to 98. And the interesting thing about him, he's a true 5-pitch pitcher because they took a sweeper and they turned it into 2 pitches, a slider, and a cutter. This year, that has been pretty good for him, even though the cutter is not his best pitch. It's probably his worst pitch. Again, it's a new pitch. So you got a 5-pitch mix. You got plus command. You've got strikeout stuff. You've got a probable rotation spot for the rest of the year with Joe Ryan's injury. It looks like it's going to be Zeke Matthews or Louis Varland. So what are your thoughts on Zeke Matthews? What kind of league should people be adding him in?
So it's a lazy comp, but the easy comp here is poor man's George Kirby. Like the ability to pound the strike zone with his stuff without having an elite offering either. Like you take a look at his overall scouting grades and you think 60 fastball, that cutter's probably a plus pitch too. And then so slider and an okay curveball as well, and with some changes as for here and there. I think that he is a better real life pitcher than a fantasy one. One of those guys who's going to give you a lot of 5 innings of 3-run baseball, 6 innings of 3-run baseball, maybe occasionally the 6 and 2, which is what you're really hoping for here. I don't see the stuff to miss a ton of bats at the next level. But if you're looking for somebody who can really help you in whip, if you're looking for somebody who's going to really help your walk rates or your strikeout to walk ratio type of thing, that makes a lot of sense. Against lineups with some big bashers, I'd probably be avoiding him because I think there is risk with those type of arms, because he has a lot of strikeouts, but we have seen guys who rely on command for strikeouts really struggle at first when they come up. Brandon Pfaadt is the first guy I think of when I think of that in that regard. And look, Brandon Pfaadt has developed into a nice little pitcher, but he went through some scuffles because it's not great stuff. It's about the deception and it's about the command. With Zeke Matthews, I think it's pretty similar. It's nice that he has a big fastball and it's started to get better. But if he's facing up against the Yankees or the Orioles or the Dodgers or Atlanta or teams like that can really bash the baseball, I'm probably avoiding him. If he's facing teams that have free swingers that don't have a lot of power, anybody against the White Sox, even though they did finally get that 10-run
throttle the Yankees. Yeah.
Congratulations on your first 10-run win, Toronto. It only took you 100, or Chicago. It only took you 120 games. But yeah, Matthews is interesting. I think he's worth adding as a speculative guy, but I think he's going to be matchup dependent for the rest of the year.
Just quick either or question within his own rotation. Simeon Woods Richardson was a prospect of note a few years ago, has kind of died down in terms of his prospect pedigree, but has been solid, not spectacular, but solid this season as kind of like a back end real life starter and a streamer in fantasy. Would you take Simeon Woods Richardson or Zeke Matthews?
That's a good one. I would probably take Woods Richardson. Now, I may have a little bit of recency bias because his last start against the Guardians was really good. 7 innings of 2-run baseball where he just allowed the 2 solo homers. In between, there's been some kind of scuffles there. I think it would depend on if you want upside or floor. If you just want floor, I'd probably go Woods Richardson. If you want ceiling, even though I just kind of poo-pooed his ceiling a little bit, I'd probably go with Zeke Matthews.
Yeah, I get that. All right. We're not going to belabor the point anymore. We'll get to this question in a second. The question is Junior Caminero or Isaac Paredes in a points league, but let's just talk about Junior Caminero. He is getting the call for the Rays. I'm a little surprised by this because, I actually need to check the dates. I do think that this was the Rays decided to sell off a bunch of their players and they're not contending this year. And so it could be a service time thing of why they waited until now to call up Caminero and why it wasn't immediately after the trade deadline.
Right.
We have to assume if they're calling him up now, he is going to play every day. My expectation, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it seems like with Paredes gone, Caminero slots in more easily as the everyday third baseman. And then Jose Caballero and Taylor Walls go back to, sharing short and moving all around.
Right.
What are your expectations for Caminero? I mean, this is somebody who is still very young. He's only 21 years old now. He got a small taste before, is hitting pretty well in the minors, but, 276 with 13 homers in 53 games in AAA is not lighting the world on fire. So what do you expect for the rest of the season at the major league level?
I'm a big Caminero fan, and I know that's not exactly a super hot take, a guy who's ranked by most people as the best prospect still in the minor leagues. That'll change in about an hour and a half or so. I like him a lot. Now, the one thing to be cognizant of is he has had inconsistency, which a lot of players his age do. And another thing is, if you're picking him up, just no stolen bases. There's zero chance that he's going to add any value on the bases, especially he's not a great runner anyway. He dealt with a quad injury that kept him out for a month. They're not going to risk that in a year, though, where Tampa Bay is clearly not that all that into competing anyway. Why would you ever take those risks? But this is elite power. This is a guy with a plus hit tool as well. This is a player that I think has some chance to drive in some runs in a somewhat underrated Tampa Bay lineup as well. And I imagine he's going to be hitting kind of in the middle of that order. Could hit near the top, but still a chance to drive in runs from that perspective. I like him a lot. And it's also worth pointing out those numbers aren't pretty. He's been really good as of late, like since basically the middle of August. I think he's hitting 300, 378, 633 in his last 10 games.
And you mentioned the stop and start, right? I mean, he has been on and off the IL a couple times in the minor leagues. Sure. That is something that can absolutely impact rhythm for a hitter. You know, he's not going to run a high walk rate. Because he is a little bit of a free swinger. I mean, he makes a lot of contact.
Yep.
You know, we talked about the park playing pretty well for pull side power. I like Caminero as well. I think, you know, you mentioned you're not going to get stolen bases, so it depends on what you need. In a points league where, you know, Bassbone is asking here, I know it's kind of aggressive given what Paredes has done in the past, but I don't think that move to Wrigley Field was really good for his power production. It is like, I think it's 50 feet further down the left field line in Wrigley than it is in Tampa, which is not nothing for a guy who hits exclusively down the foul line, pull side power. So yeah, I think I would lean the upside of Caminero here rather than Paredes.
Yeah, I think so too. The only thing I would say is this is really close. And the fact that it's really close really speaks to how good Junior Caminero is, because Isaac Paredes is a really good player. Boy, I think I would probably go Caminero just because I think at this point, I want that upside. I would have the fear of missing out on that type of thing. If Isaac Paredes goes on a great run, maybe I kick myself in the you-know-what a little bit, but not too badly. Like, because of the fact that I know what Junior Caminero is capable of, and I've seen I've seen what Tampa Bay prospects have done. Like, in they do a really good job with these things, and they usually call up the guy at the right point. There are examples where they haven't completely gotten it right, but they get it right an awful lot. It's close, but I think I would take Caminero.
And then we got a drop question to get Caminero from Michael Mendez. And Michael, if you're still listening, chime in the chat, because it does say here that you have to drop Musgrove or Gavin Williams, and then also one of these hitters if you want to get Caminero. So I'm just confused as to if you're just making a hitter for hitter swap or why the pitchers need to be involved. But let's just look at the hitters that Michael's mentioning here, dropping one of these guys for Junior Caminero. Mark Vientos, Michael Garcia, Nick Castellanos, and Brandon Lau. I will say, okay, and Michael points out Musgrove has to be activated off the IL.
Oh, okay.
So he has to either drop Musgrove to not activate him, or he has to activate Musgrove and then drop Gavin Williams. We'll get to that question in a second. But just this hitter swap. Listen, I really like Michael Garcia as a player. I get that the struggles they're present, right? I think he had a really hot start to the year.
Right.
It has not gone particularly well for him. He's moved down to like 8th in the lineup most games. We really liked seeing him hit first. It added some value. You're keeping Michael Garcia if you want stolen bases. He has almost 30 on the year. He's got 28. He is hitting 274 in 21 games since the All-Star break. So even though the power is not there, 274 with 7 steals in 21 games is giving you kind of what you wanted from Michael Garcia when you drafted him. Right. So I think if you need the steals, I'm keeping Garcia. To me, this comes down to dropping Vientos or Brandon Lau. Vientos has really not played as well of late. He's battling an injury right now, but the batting average has really dipped over the last month or so. And we know that he has really good power, and you're rostering him for power. But, even if Vientos has slightly better raw power than Caminero still has good power. Yeah. And I think he's going to be a better bet for batting average than Vientos. So I could see dropping Vientos for Caminero, because I don't think you need Garcia and Vientos and Caminero. That's a lot of third basemen on the same roster.
Yeah, Vientos would be the guy that I would drop for Caminero. Basically, I was thinking about Castellanos, but what Castellanos has done since July is basically kind of what you're hoping that Junior Caminero can give you, like around a 280 average with around a 460 slugging. I think Vientos is the answer there. I think that Caminero is just a better player than Mark Vientos. And That's a real life thing, but that's also a fantasy thing. I just think he has a better hit tool. I think the power is pretty similar. I think the lineup is maybe advantage Mets, but not enough for me not to add him, and neither one of them going to help you much in stolen bases. So I'll take the ceiling play and go with Caminero.
Yeah, and just, Michael added a little addition here that in terms of just positional flexibility, that he's using Michael Garcia a lot as his like backup shortstop, and
Gotcha.
Vientos is one of his only two first basemen behind Alec Burleson. So like, listen, I don't really want to drop Brandon Lau because he's hitting 276 with 5 home runs in 20 games in the second half of the year, and he's playing
Yeah.
pretty regularly.
Sure.
But I would still rather have Caminero than Lau. So for me, I'd rather drop Vientos and, go it with just Burleson at first for a while and see if I can. But I if you really wanted to, I could see dropping Lau for Caminero.
Yeah,
And then the other question here, which we can get to, he asked, basically, would you rather have Joe Musgrove or Gavin Williams at this point? Musgrove, made his first start yesterday coming off the IL. The velocity is back up a little bit, which was nice. But what do you think? Would you rather have Joe Musgrove or Gavin Williams?
Probably Musgrove. It's close again. I'm a big Gavin Williams fan. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to go with Gavin Williams. I know he was really bad in that start against Baltimore, but he backed it up really well with the outing against Cleveland. I just think there's a little more upside in Gavin Williams' right arm at this point. Musgrove is probably the safer play, and the Padres have been playing really well and give you some chance for the wins. And like you said, the velocity up. I think I'd just go with the upside of Gavin Williams, even though like he didn't have a ton of strikeouts against Minnesota. I thought the stuff looked really good, and he had struck out 8 guys at least over the last 3 starts as well, 9, 8, and 8 against Baltimore, and then Detroit. But it's still good to see him miss some bats. I have a little more faith in the upside of Gavin Williams than I do than Joe Musgrove at this point.
Yeah, I get that. I think Musgrove is safer.
Yeah.
And I know that's weird to say given how he looked to start the year, but
Sure.
I think he was pretty clearly not healthy. And I think Musgrove has always been a fringe top 25 pitcher, or I say as always, but in recent years since, being freed from the Pirates.
Right.
And so I think this version of Musgrove, which was like 93 with the fastball, the sweeper was back. He looked like kind of like a kitchen sink guy again, where he was throwing 6 different pitches. And I think that, the added velocity back on the fastball means that hitters won't sit breaking ball, which they were doing before. And so I like the safety and security of Musgrove. I'm probably not starting him in Coors in his second start back when he only threw 63 pitches. So that is something you have to keep in mind.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my take on it. So I guess we both kind of agree that maybe Williams for ceiling, but Musgrove for security.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like looking at the game log just a couple days ago. The concern I have with Musgrove is that he has 1 start this year with more than 7 strikeouts. Like that's it. He had a really nice start against Cincinnati on May 1st, which was a while ago. And he only had the 1 strikeout. Now the Pirates are a little bit of a different breed, but I still think I would like to see a little more strikeouts from him. But I totally get it. Joe Musgrove has a really good track record. Wouldn't shock me at all if he was a very strong option down the stretch. I think either one you're going to be pretty happy with.
Yeah. Dad wanted to thank you for helping him jump off the ledge and add Tyler Fitzgerald back when he wasn't really sure if it was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
It's been a great experience so far, he says. So I guess he wants your help with another infielder. He wants to know if he should add Will Wagner. Will Wagner was part of the Yusei Kikuchi trade. This is Billy Wagner's son.
That is Billy Wagner's son. Yep, we are.
Billy Wagner's son.
We're gonna live forever, my friend.
Yes, who's 26 years old already somehow. But Wagner was promoted from AAA. He started on Monday. In his first start, he went 3 for 4. Scored a run. Knocked in an RBI. He was hitting 307 in 70 games in AAA for the Astros, hitting 400 in 7 games in AAA for the Blue Jays. Not a lot of power, not a lot of speed. This sounds like Spencer Horwitz on the same team.
Yeah.
Is that a lazy comparison, or is that kind of an accurate one?
It's probably both. It may be lazy just because, it didn't take a lot of effort to do it, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong either. It depends on what you're looking for. Like, if you're just looking for somebody who can help you in the average category, I'd absolutely go get Will Wagner, because this dude can hit. He's walked 59 times and only struck out 37 times in the year of our Lord 2024. That's an impressive statistic, no matter what league you are playing in. Not going to provide a lot of pop, not going to provide any stolen bases. He's not a great athlete, but there's some guys who just kind of get it. He kind of reminds me of, and this is aging me, a little bit of a Hal Morris type, the type of guy who could hit 310 in his sleep, but, is only going to give you like 10 to 12 homers in his best years and not going to be a huge run producer because he's probably not hitting in that type of lineup,
right?
Or in that part of the lineup, excuse me. But I do think that if you're looking for somebody who can help you in the average category, or if you're playing in an OBP league, yeah, he's worth a speculative ad. Just don't expect 3 for 4 every night, because baseball is really hard. But I do think that Will Wagner is at least worth keeping an eye on for sure for the rest of the year.
Yes. 3 for 4 every night would be truly incredible. Yes. Gerald asks, what are our thoughts on Starling Marte coming back? So Starling Marte is rehabbing with what the Mets referred to as a bone bruise in his knee, but it kept him out for over a month.
Yeah.
I will say he is running in the minors. When he was rehabbing in single A in St. Lucie, he did homer, he did steal base. So seeing him run on a rehab assignment is comforting to know that, they may let him run when he comes back too. And that's important, because that is the crux of Starling Marte's value, right? If he's coming up and he's not running, then what is he really giving you? And so I do like that aspect. And listen, he was playing pretty fine this year, basically a 280 average in 66 games with 7 home runs, 12 steals, just a 21% strikeout rate. I think he is going to slot in as an everyday outfielder for the Mets. I think that, or if they want to, give him a day off here and there to, rest, for health purposes, fine. But I don't, Harrison Bader has fallen off a little bit. I don't think Bader is keeping Starling Marte out of the lineup. Jesse Winker, we know, is going to sit against all lefties, so that's an easy lefties for Marte. And Winker has been, fine, but not great.
Right.
Since coming over. So the Mets can play around with some things, but I think Marte plays relatively regularly, and I wouldn't be running to add him, but I think like in 15 team leagues off the bat, you can bring him back in. But yeah, what do you think on Marte?
Yeah, I mean, look, if he's still available in leagues, why not? What's the harm here, especially this late in the year? It's not, look, all of my prospects from my top 10 list have been pretty much called up. It's not like you're holding on to those guys. Like, at this point, you'd be dropping a Jason Dominguez for a Starling Marte, as much as I'd love to hold on to Dominguez for that just chance of a call up. But yeah, I will say the one thing about Starling Marte is that not a great defensive player. And with Jesse Winker being, oh boy, defensive player, you maybe want Bader in the lineup for those type of days. And so maybe you see Starling Marte not get quite as much playing time as you'd hope for. But the fact that he can hit for some decent power, a decent average, and like you mentioned, the fact that he's running in his rehab assignment suggests that he can be a helper in that category too. It's kind of an easy one to go pick up and at least put on your bench for a little bit to see how things shake out.
Yeah. Cow Chad mentioned them. That was funny, which that Starling Marte with his lower body issues getting back before Kyle Tucker with very similar injuries, despite Tucker getting hurt Marte getting hurt 2 weeks later, might be one of the signs of the apocalypse. And you're right.
It might be.
Listen, Kyle Tucker jogged on the field on Monday, so know he is so close.
There was a report today that apparently Joe Espada said that he is turning the corner. So there's a positive development in this, but I feel like he's done like laps in terms of turning corners at this point.
Yes.
Like I think he's completed the Bristol 500 at this point, or wherever they're going to have that Atlanta Cincinnati game at. They've turned a lot of corners with Kyle Tucker. I will believe Kyle Tucker plays when Kyle Tucker plays.
Yeah, which is it's sad but true at this
Oh
point.
yeah.
You mentioned Jason Dominguez, so I'll get to another question Dad asked just because he asked about Jason Dominguez.
Mhm.
Although there isn't a path for Jason Dominguez right now, is it possible that he's called up when rosters expand? There is a path for Jason Dominguez right now. It's getting rid of Alex Verdugo, who's not playing well.
Yeah.
And the Yankees, for some reason, not only don't want to do that, but they want to keep letting Alex Verdugo hit leadoff. And fine. And they can lose by double digits to the White Sox and whatever. Have your fun. Do it. I don't get it. I get that Alex Verdugo is a good defensive player, or a solid defensive player, probably better than Dominguez. I understand that. But I just don't think he's doing enough to warrant taking up a starting spot in the lineup from Dominguez. And if you want to say, then Verdugo can be the fourth outfielder, and, they maybe get rid of Trent Grisham, who's also not really doing much other than being probably their best defensive outfielder, even though he doesn't play. But I don't know. I mean, you seem to suggest there's no real reason to hold Dominguez. I dropped him in a redraft league this week because I just didn't want to take the bench spot up anymore. So I get it, but I also don't get it at the same time.
It's very frustrating. It's so funny. It's almost like they're trying to justify the trade return with Alex Verdugo, but it's not like the Yankees gave up a ton to get Alex Verdugo. They gave up a middle reliever and then maybe a back end starter and an organizational depth guy. I don't understand it, but after hearing Cashman's comments is why I kind of and look, I ranked him at number 2 on my list. Was right behind Caminero on my most recent top 10. And if the Yankees do call him up, oh boy, go add him ASAP, because his fantasy upside is so palpable. I mean, we saw it. We saw what he could do last year. It's just going to take maybe a little less stubbornness from whoever really wants Alex Verdugo in the lineup. But it just really, and when rosters expand, maybe that changes. I don't know who exactly they would be considering for those 2 extra spots, because that's just not on my purview at the moment. But I do think if he does get added, you might as well play him, because he's a better baseball player right now than Alex Verdugo. Alex Verdugo's a better defensive player, not enough to justify him playing mediocre offense at best every single day. So yeah, I hope Dominguez gets the call this year. If not, he's a great play for 2025. He'll be a great play for 2025 regardless, but it's very frustrating to see him in AAA right now.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I don't know, most of my Yankee fan friends agree as well. Cow Chad asks, this is a little bit of a rankings for us. Rank the everything is burning middle infield options. We talked about some of these before. Santiago Espinal, Otto Lopez, Will Wagner, Eric Sogard, and empty calories, Jose Iglesias. It's Candelita, by the way, Jose Iglesias, his preferred nickname. Listen, everything is burning on these guys. I think, as you mentioned, it will come down a little bit to what your needs are. I will say, Jose Iglesias is no longer playing regularly. Santiago Espinal started 2 games last week for the Reds. I know Jonathan India hasn't been playing well. So for me, it comes down to Otto Lopez, Will Wagner, and Eric Sogard, because they're the only 3 that are currently playing regularly or figure to play regularly. Sogard is not hitting really well right now for the Red Sox, and the Red Sox do have other options with Enmanuel Valdez and David Hamilton, or if Vaughn Grissom starts hitting in AAA. So that leash feels like it could be short. Otto Lopez is hitting under 200 in the second half of the year for the Marlins. I weirdly think I'll put Will Wagner at the top of this, just because I think he's going to hit and there's a good chance he plays. And I guess I'd put Sogard second because he's playing every day in a good lineup right now. But I think you're probably looking to upgrade any and all of these guys if somebody pops.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, it is Nick Sogard. I think Chad making the joke about former
That's true.
Czech legend Eric Sogard.
It is,
but yes,
and they must be related. I haven't looked it up, but they have to be related.
If they're not, it's a very weird thing. But yeah, I think I go Wagner. That's the one guy here who I think has a smidgen of upside, even if it's just a one category guy. I don't see any of these other guys really helping in any of the other categories. So I'd go Wagner, and then I would put Lopez at 2, maybe Sogard at 3, Espinal 4, Iglesias 5.
They are cousins, by the way.
Oh, okay.
They're cousins.
Cool. Nice.
Eric Sogard and Nick Sogard. So there is a relation
Good.
there. I'm going to put up this question from Michael, which kind of comes back to what we were talking about before. He was asking the question about dropping Gavin Williams to get Joe Musgrove. But I think this question, it can kind of be made more broad because he's asking, do you think 4 closers is too much? He has Kirby Yates, Alexis Diaz, Devin Williams, and now Ryan Walker. And the thing here is, like, especially at this time of year, 4 closers is only too much if you don't need saves or if you don't need saves that much, right?
Sure.
Obviously, if you're doing head-to-head, then you're looking at your past head-to-head experience. Do I need 4 closers? How have I been doing in saves in previous matchups? Have I not been doing well? I tend to think in head-to-head leagues, 3 closers is more than enough because you still need, strikeouts and wins and et cetera. And in Roto, you need to look at where am I in the standings for saves? What are the range of outcomes in terms of winning and losing points and saves? If I can gain 3 points based on how far, behind I am the guys in front of me, but I could also lose 4 points because maybe, I'm only 2 saves up on this guy and 3 up on that and whatever, then that's a 7-point swing in saves. So saves are a meaningful category for you because, any type of a 7-point swing at this stage in the season can be huge. Sure. If you could only gain like 1 point in saves and could only lose 2 points in saves, logically based on your categories, then having 3 closers instead of 4 closers is probably the way to go, because what is gaining 1 point really mean to you that you want to roster 4 closers if you have needs in other spaces?
Yeah, it depends to me on like where you are in the category, where you are in the win category as well for starters. Like, do you really need to start playing catch up in that category or innings pitched or anything of those situations? But typically, I like to play with 3 closers. The one thing I'll point out about his situation specifically is the Rangers stink, and I'm not sure the Reds are all that good either. The Cubs are kind of inconsistent, and I wouldn't be surprised if Milwaukee's going to turn to Devin Williams, but maybe not necessarily every single save chance, as he's coming back from the injury. So that would be a little bit tougher for me, just because you may have 4, but in reality, maybe you have 2.5 to 3. That would be my situation. Like, those are good. They have been very good options at times this year. Alexis Diaz has his ups and downs, but when he's at his best, he's pretty dang good. That would be the one thing that I would be worried about dropping one of these guys, is that you may have a little bit of a spurt where one of these guys doesn't get a save for you for a while. So that would be a little bit tougher for me. But ideally, if you're in a good situation with your save stat, I would probably drop Walker for Musgrove or Gavin Williams at this point.
I would agree with you there. Walker has been good. We don't know how he'll be as a closer, and we also don't know how long he'll have the role, if he'll get it every single day.
Right.
So who knows? I assume if you're sending Duvall down to the minors and not just in low leverage situations, it's going to take a while for him to come back up. But who knows?
Exactly.
Dad's asking Geraldo Perdomo or Joey Ortiz, which I find to be an interesting conversation. I was a believer in Joey Ortiz, coming into the year, and I think he's been solid. I think he's kind of at times like done what we thought he would do, is hit for a decent enough batting average, steal a few bases, hit a few out of the park, but nothing crazy in that regard, and play good defense. I've added Geraldo Perdomo in a few places because he has been pretty good since coming back. I'm looking right now on the Fangraphs player rater. Over the last 30 days, he is the 42nd ranked infielder. Oh, wow. So first base, second base, third base, short, all of them, 42nd ranked infielder, earning $10 of value over the last month. That's right behind Jorge Polanco. That's ahead of Nolan Shanuel, Nolan Arenado, Alec Burleson, those guys. It should be noted, I think a lot of that value, well, first of all, hitting 291 over the last 30 days is good. Yeah. A lot of that value is scoring 17 runs, right? But he's also the 9 hitter. Yeah. So Arizona's running really hot right now. How long can you actually count on Perdomo to score that many runs while hitting in the 9 hole? Now, the hitters after him are good. So there's a chance they'll drive him in if he gets on, but he is going to consistently get fewer and fewer at bats. And so that is a little bit of my concern. But Joey Ortiz over the last month is the 91st ranked infielder. He is hitting just 225 over his last. It's basically the same amount of plate appearances, 89 plate appearances for Ortiz, 87 for Perdomo. So I would go Perdomo here between these two. I just don't think Perdomo is going to run as hot as he has been recently.
Sure. Yeah. And, he doesn't have to run as hot to be a solid player. And, Joey Ortiz, as much as I was believing in it, and maybe this is a little bit Captain Hindsight, it's a reminder that the reason his prospect pedigree was not because of his offensive skill set, right? It was because he was a really good defensive player and that he would probably hit enough to be an everyday player. We're kind of seeing that. By the way, it's worth pointing out that the guy who had been driving him in a lot is Ketel Marte, who had another ankle injury last night. I would not be stunned if this is an injured list stint type of thing, just because he got the injury, came back, and then re-aggravated the injury. And usually when that happens, you usually see, even if it's just a precautionary thing, they usually end up going on the injured list. Now, that could mean two things. Number one, maybe a weaker lineup hitting in front of him, or maybe Perdomo moves up in the lineup.
Up. Yeah,
maybe that is the guy
he could hit in the 2 hole, and that could be a big boost in value.
And that would be a big boost in value as well. So that's something to keep an eye on if you can keep an eye on it. But if you're just adding one right now, I think it would be Perdomo, even if he's going to be hitting in that 9th spot.
Yeah, and then another just either or. Michael says Castellanos or Seiya rest of season. Again, if we just use the same Fangraphs player rater, they're super close. Seiya Suzuki is the 43rd ranked outfielder over the last month, earning $6.90 of value. Nick Castellanos is the 47th ranked outfielder over the last month, earning $6.40 of value. I think it just comes down to who you believe in at this point. It's a little bit of a coin flip. They're both have the potential to be strong power hitters. Castellanos has 2 homers over the last month. Seiya has 3. Amazingly, they both have 11 RBIs and 12 runs scored and 1 steal.
Wow.
So I think the reason you're getting that value difference is over the last month, Suzuki has 1 more home run. But that's what you're talking about. Like over the last month, that's how close they are. Castellanos hits in a better ballpark and in a better lineup.
Sure.
But I tend to think Seiya Suzuki is a better hitter at this point in their career. So it's really tough, but I might go Castellanos.
It's close. It's really close. What you got to do is you got to look for if there are any world events coming up, because if there's anything big, if there's any type of disaster that can happen, Nick Castellanos is about to give you 3 homers and 10 RBI. That's just the way that this world works. I think I would just go Suzuki just because I have a little bit more confidence in him. The thing about Castellanos is he was so bad to begin the year, and once you acquire him, those numbers, you don't have anything to do with them. Like, you're only getting what he's done. And like I mentioned when we were talking about him earlier, he's been really good basically since the start of July. I just think Suzuki is a better combination of ceiling and floor for me, but either one, that is, talk about a coin flip. Like, they are just so similar in skill and so similar in production that I'll just take the guy who's been a little better over the course of the season in Suzuki.
I get that for sure.
Yeah.
Gerald asks, is Daniel Hudson worth the pickup if he's the primary closer for the Dodgers? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
I was stashing Ben Joyce everywhere prior to the deadline because I felt like he'd be like the closer in the second half that gets, picked up off waivers. I dropped Ben Joyce in a few places like last week and the week before for Daniel Hudson because just on the chance that he is the guy. Now, listen, Michael Kopech has looked amazing since coming to the Dodgers. Yep. It wouldn't surprise me if Kopech starts getting some save chances down the stretch so they can see what he could do. But Evan Phillips is not right. Anthony Banda and Alex Vesia are lefties. They're not going to be the primary closer in that bullpen. Joe Kelly, he's not a threat to close, in my opinion. No. So I really don't see how it's anybody other than Hudson right now, or maybe Hudson splitting with a lefty or splitting with Kopech or whatever. So yeah, I'm happy to add Daniel Hudson if I need saves wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good call, by the way, on dropping someone like Joyce for Hudson. Unfortunately, playing the "we don't want you to get saves because we know how arbitration works" thing, which is
Yes.
just so freaking stupid. What an unbelievably dumb, archaic system we have for determining contracts in baseball. Like, he'll be the closer next year and probably dominate in that role. Like, Ben Joyce, I think, is going to be like a top 10 closer for a very, very long time. That stuff has just improved so much, even though he had his struggles in his last outing.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, is Daniel Hudson going to be a guy who has a couple of clunkers because he doesn't have great swing and miss stuff? Yeah, it's going to happen here and there. But he's the closer for the Dodgers, and nobody's taking that role right now. As good as Kopech has looked, by the way, I'm sure he's just loving being in LA right now.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm sure it's great.
Love it. He's out of Chicago. He can go date 16 more reality television stars. This is just, everything is coming up Michael Kopech in 2024.
Yes. Good for you, Michael Kopech.
Good for you, Mike.
We'll take a couple more to end here. I just want to use this question from Dad to point out. Dad says Martin Perez has been pretty all right for the Pirate. He's been pretty all right. Could he be a sneaky rest of season addition? I just want to say it's August 13th. I'm no longer caring about rest of season for my starting pitchers.
Yeah.
I have the guys that I'm clearly not dropping. Yep. Right. And you know who those guys are on your roster. You're clearly not dropping. Sure. Anybody that is below the I'm clearly not dropping him tier becomes a streamer.
Yeah.
Because I need to look ahead and say, okay, am I going to pitch this guy for the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah.
I only have 6 weeks left in the season. So if I'm not going to use a guy for 2 weeks, that means I'm not going to use him for a third of the season.
Right.
And so why is he sitting on my bench for a third of the season when I'm not going to play him? And that's actually something I forgot until we're now just talking about it. Of part of the reason why I'm happy to drop Gavin Williams is Gavin Williams' next 2 starts are at Milwaukee, which I don't love.
No.
And then at the Yankees.
Oh, no. Yeah,
and so I probably don't want to start Gavin Williams in either one of those. Obviously, if I'm in like a 15-team league or something like that, I might have to. But in a 12-team league, like I don't really want to start Gavin Williams there. And that's where it's like, yeah, he becomes a drop for me. Right. So Martin Perez, right? He is facing the Pirates this week, and that's great.
Revenge game.
But then he goes to Minnesota next week.
Yeah.
I don't really want to play him in Minnesota.
No, sure don't.
So I love adding Martin Perez for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then get rid of him. And I think that's how you need to treat all of your starting pitchers. I'm actually looking at this on my own right now because like I was really close to cutting Nick Lodolo in a couple leagues in 12 team, right? Because he has not looked great, but he gets Kansas City and then he gets Pittsburgh. And so it's like, okay, the Kansas City start isn't great, but it's not awful. And the Pittsburgh start is good.
Yeah.
And the Pittsburgh start is good. So I really do think you need to look like 1 to 2 weeks in the future for your starting pitchers right now and not rest of season.
I totally agree. The exception to that is if you play in a league where you are limited by how many additions you can make, if you are limited by how many innings you play in and that stuff. My suggestion in those leagues is to find a new league because that's a stupid way to play. It doesn't reward people who actually care and make transactions. So, but if you are playing in one of those leagues, if you are somebody who, if you add Martin Perez, you have to carry for the rest of the season, absolutely not. Like, go take a look at that Savant page. I know Savant can be kind of a scary one, but like, he just doesn't have the stuff, even playing behind, I think, a pretty good San Diego lineup. I just can't trust him enough because like a start against Minnesota can be an absolute disaster. And this late in the year, you can't afford disasters. You can't make up for it.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to end on something for your own work. But you mentioned your article, which comes out on Mondays, highlighting, prospects to add. You mentioned there weren't many guys left, but just because now I think a lot of the big names are gone, I think talking about some of the names to keep an eye on the rest of the way becomes more useful because I think they're not a lot of household names. We mentioned Junior Caminero. We mentioned Jason Dominguez at the top. Are there any other hitting prospects that people should, keep an eye out for, add to their watch list? Because if they do get a shot at the end of the year, they could be useful in redraft formats.
Sure. One that immediately comes to mind, he was number 3 on my list, is Jordan Beck of the Colorado Rockies. He's been absolutely outstanding since coming back from his hand injury. He underwent surgery. He's hitting 316, 395, 540, 8 homers. in his 42 games with Albuquerque. Wasn't great with the Rockies, but he showed some flashes there, especially for such a young hitter in terms of experience. That 30-1 strikeout to walk ratio is a little bit scary, but I still think the upside there, plus the home park that he's going to be playing in. Moises Ballesteros, it's so weird to me that he hasn't gotten the call, to be honest, even as a 20-year-old. The Cubs have gotten nothing from their catchers. And this is a guy, even though he's 5'7", he's the Spud Webb of catchers. He is a guy who can hit for average. He's got some pop in his bat. He's got a good approach. He's a good enough defensive player. If he gets the call and you're playing in a 2-catcher league, especially I'm adding him. Kyle Manzardo has been pretty solid since getting sent back down. And the Guardians have gotten a lot of mediocre production from the first base position, to be honest with you. Since then, I'd be taking a look at Dylan Cruz as well. It's not 100% that he's going to get called up. In fact, I'd put it below 20%. But just because that guy has so much upside, the chance to hit for average, the chance to hit for power, the chance to steal bases, and we have seen the Nationals. Now, it took them a little longer with James Wood, but we've seen the Nationals be extremely aggressive with promotions. Wouldn't shock me at all if he had a chance to come and join the Nationals for that final few weeks, and could be really fantasy successful if he does, because that talent, no, he's not Paul Skeens, but he has a chance to be one of the better fantasy outfielders someday. Those are the guys that I'd be looking to add.
Yeah, and just a note on a guy who is already up, but I think is being discussed. Probably more of a 2-catcher league guy right now, but it's Adrian Del Castillo for the Diamondbacks. He was somebody who really kind of popped when I looked at like a minor league leaderboard article. I did Mining the Minors a few weeks ago, where I looked at like not just top prospects, just who is playing well. And he was hitting really well. And he's a guy who profiled, it's like, maybe he won't catch well enough to be a catcher long-term in the major leagues, but he can hit. And so maybe he DHs some. Well, he's got some leash as a catcher, because they've said Gabriel Moreno is out for a few weeks. Like the injury is not a quick one for Moreno. And Del Castillo has very real power. And so I don't know if he's an ad in 1-catcher formats right now, but I think in 2-catcher formats, like if you're down to like the Ben Rortvets of the world, and I've been there, like, to be fair, even Patrick Bailey, who I cut in a few 2-catcher leagues this week because he wasn't hitting particularly well. Like I kind of prefer Del Castillo to some of those guys, because I think the bat is real. And we'll end with a trendy prospect name, but Couchad has said potentially Christian Moore. I mean, it's the Angels. We know they're going to do it just for the memes, but I know we're joking about the memes here, but the Angels are super aggressive in promoting their prospects. Moore was very aggressively promoted to Double-A and has been hitting well, albeit in an incredibly small sample size. But do you think there's actually any chance even the Angels decide to give him a shot to get MLB at bats this year?
If it was any other organization, I would be saying no with a bunch of swear words in front of it. Absolutely not. But it's the Angels. So yeah, there's absolutely a chance. And look, this guy was the best player on the best team in college baseball last year and came on really strong.
Not even last year. This year. It was
this year. This year. Yeah. This last season. Yeah, you're right. He is a really interesting talent, like a second baseman who can hit for probably above average power, a plus hit tool, not a ton of speed, but enough there that I could see him being ready, especially at the second base position, right? We're not talking about a shortstop. We're not talking about a center fielder. Like what he is defensively is pretty much ready to go. There's not a lot of work that needs to be done there. And look, we have seen their last 3 picks reach the major leagues so flippin' quickly that I can't completely rule it out. I said it on Twitter. It will not shock me one bit come September 1st if Christian Moore is a Los Angeles Angel. And if he is, I think he's worth a speculative ad.
Which is so wild to say, but I get it. Yeah,
I get nuts.
Make sure you continue to read Chris's articles on Monday. As we mentioned, as the names get less and less familiar, really reading those articles becomes more and more important.
For sure.
I'll have my mixing it up article coming out tomorrow over on NBC Sports. I'm looking at the pitch mix changes that the Orioles have made to Zach Eflin and Trevor Rogers, that the Astros have made to Yusei Kikuchi, or sorry, that the Giants this year made to Robbie Ray. And then I'm going to break down Zeke Matthews' debut.
Nice.
So that'll be out Wednesday morning over on NBC Sports. Chris and I always kind of tweet out links to our work. So if you are on Twitter, make sure you follow us there. I am at Samulski NYC. Chris is at Crawford _MILB. You can see it down beneath our photos right there. And we're back now. We're doing it through the end of the regular season. These Tuesday Q&As are back for good for the next 6 weeks or so. We'll mix in some off-season ones as well as you're making decisions on your keepers and your first-year player drafts and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you check that out. And then check out the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Show, the podcast on Wednesdays, where you can get it's available where you get all of your podcasts. So make sure you continue to check that out through the rest of the year. I'm Eric, and we will see you next Tuesday on the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Q&A.